Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. I have three guests with me today. I have Scott Darby, Kevin Lord, Andy Buchan, and they're associated with IOHK Input Output, and they're going to talk about a very interesting project called Symphony. So welcome, guys.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, great to be here,
Chris.
Great. So before we talk about Symphony, why don't you introduce the audience, introduce yourselves to the audience, give whatever background you want, right? Education, career. So why don't we start with Scott?
Okay, so I'm Scott. I'm IOHK's in-house creative coder. I'm a graphics developer who creates immersive data visualizations using WebGL in the browser. I've got a history in sound design and a long history of web development as well.
Okay, good. All right. And so blockchains, are they new to you, working in the blockchain space, Scott?
I first got interested in Bitcoin in around 2013. So yeah, I've always been interested in it since then. I've been working with IOHK for about a year and a half now on this project. Okay,
great. And Andy? Did I pronounce your last name correctly, by the way, Buchan?
Very close, Chris. Very close.
Okay.
It's Buchan.
Okay, Buchan.
But I cut a lot of people a lot of slack. Don't worry. So I'm a creative director over at experiential studio Kuva, and we work really closely alongside Scott in terms of Symphony. Our specialism as a studio is experiential digital innovation in brackets, and we kind of look at the kind of physical aspect of bringing experiences to life through digital tools, whether that's VR or AR. And we, like Scott, have been working on the project for about a year and a half. In terms of my how green I am in the blockchain space, the crypto space, I think a year and a half was the first time I really got into it and got introduced to it. And so certainly there's a very sharp learning curve in terms of kind of deciphering and unpicking all of it, but it's been a fantastic journey really over that past year and a half. So yeah, that's where I come from.
Great. And I think a lot of people know Kevin Lord, but Kevin, why don't you give another intro just in case there's somebody out there that doesn't know you?
Yeah, no problem. So I am a community manager for IOHK. So I've been doing a lot of community management with Ethereum Classic and now with Symphony. So we're taking on the Symphony project, and I'm sort of liaising between the community and the project. So it's really exciting, and I'm really happy to be a part of this group. I'm surrounded by nothing but amazing people. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with this project.
Okay, great. Oh, and you forgot to mention the coolest thing, one of the coolest things about you, right? The former DJ.
That's right. That's right. former DJ. Yes.
All right. So then why don't you guys introduce people to Symphony so that people know what the product is about? So I understand there's currently a 1.0 and then there's a 2.0 version coming. So why don't we start with the 1.0 description?
Okay, yeah. So version 1.0, we were initially asked a question by Charles Hoskinson, which was, what does the blockchain look and sound like? Which kind of was a seemingly simple question on the surface, but once we started delving into it, it's an incredibly complicated thing to do. So the first version that we have up on symphony.iohk.io it's almost a proof of concept. It was a challenge to take the Bitcoin blockchain data and produce a data visualization from that and generate sound from that. So you can go and look at that on the website I just mentioned. But so while we were working on, or when we got to the end of working on that, we realized there's so much more that you can explore with this data, and it's a really interesting data source, and people aren't really doing that much kind of creative work with it. So we've really, with version 2, we've really kind of narrowed down into various different specific elements of the blockchain. So we're looking at things like individual transaction data, the Merkle tree. So we're taking all of the structure that you can see visually and all of the sound that you will hear in Symphony 2 has come directly from the data structures within the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay, so a lot of people are probably wondering this question, having this question. So, can you elaborate on what you mean by hearing the blockchain, and is there any applications, or what kind of people are interested in that?
So I guess the concept really is, if you know how planets basically have a sonic resonance to them, you can basically listen to planets in space, and they each have their unique kind of sound. So we're taking that kind of approach with the sound coming from the blockchain. So we want people to be able to listen to it and ascertain different properties about the data just purely by listening. So it's not just random, or doesn't have too much creative embellishment. It really is that you can listen to it and you can get an idea of what's going on at that particular point in time.
So presumably, like if there was a string of blocks that maybe didn't have a lot of transactions in them, you would hear it would sound a little differently when you were hearing the blockchains, and you would eventually, like a dolphin, you then associate certain sounds, tones with different properties.
Absolutely, that's completely correct. So we're looking at the number of transactions in a block to generate the sound, and we're also looking at something called network health, which is how high the fees are to the transaction value. Because in Bitcoin, you'll generally put more fees with the transaction if you want it to get through more quickly. And at times when you may consider the network to be unhealthy, is when everyone's trying to get their transaction processed quickly. So you can hear that property, and it really quite affects the sound quite dramatically.
Okay, I knew Charles was a lot more talented than I was, and you guys said you were creative. I never would have, in my wildest dreams, thought about making a sound version of the blockchain. So I'm still kind of intrigued and blown away that you guys worked on this idea. Now, can I ask, what is what's the advantage over just looking at graphs of whatever properties you want on the blockchain?
I think it's really appealing to a much wider audience, because a graph will be understandable to somebody that knows what they're looking for and has an understanding of Bitcoin. But we really want this to appeal to a really wide audience. We want people to see it and hear it and think that's really interesting, and then kind of find out, oh, that's actually Bitcoin data.
Okay. Now, as a teacher and now a faculty at a university, I have learned the hard way that different people learn things differently. Some people are more visual, some people are more audio than others. So, I could see that maybe this would appeal to some people, and they would think this was, just the gift that you guys created this. So I'm certainly open to that. I never would have thought to do that, but yeah, I'm glad you guys are trying it out. And so you did Bitcoin, and I assume you could do other blockchains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're concentrating on Bitcoin initially because that's obviously the first cryptocurrency, and once we're happy that we've got that completely right, we can take a lot of the visual and sonic concepts from that and apply them to different blockchains. Ultimately, we want to have this whole universe of different blockchain visualizations where you can compare different blockchains against each other and see where a particular blockchain like Cardano or Ethereum may differ to Bitcoin or be more efficient.
Okay, so 1.0, you've already talked about audio. Why don't you elaborate on the visual component of 1.0?
Yeah, so 1.0, we're visualizing all of the blocks in a day around a sort of a spiral structure going backwards in time. So you can look at a day's worth of blocks, and you can get an idea of how many transactions there were on that day based on how big these blocks are. And then you can select individual blocks, and you can hear a unique kind of sound sequence which has been generated from that block data.
Oh, okay. So the thought is that this would be like a daily update, the audio and visual, or that's one potential application.
Yeah, and I mean it's ongoing. So you can with 1.0 you can explore the entire history right back to the Genesis block.
Okay. Now I don't know if you guys have seen sci-fi movies like Minority Report, but there's sometimes you'll see these futuristic movies where they have this interface, this fancy user interface to the computer, and then it's almost like you guys are working towards that sci-fi future, right, where the actor has that fancy interface that we don't have today.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really thinking of innovative ways in which we can allow people to explore this data, and especially looking at things like virtual reality and augmented reality. Like, how can we use that extra dimension to really enhance the experience and allow people to really drill down into this data?
Right. Now, actually, I now that can I ask you a general question about virtual reality? Because the history of the internet is that the experience and the graphics, the web improves. So it seems to me that 3D or virtual reality is like the logical next step. So it would seem to me, and I can't predict the future, obviously, but that the web and things are going to become more and more 3D. What do you think? Even televisions, like why wouldn't everything go to 3D when the computers can support it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's the way it's going. And with graphics, processor power getting better and better all the time. I mean, even in your mobile phone now, you've got a pretty decent GPU in there. So you can have that virtual reality experience just with your mobile.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely see it going that way. Right.
Yeah, and this is another way that it can apply to blockchains, because the virtual reality applications are going to need a lot of processing, and people are working on blockchain applications where individual users could donate spare computer time, and I've heard some startups talk about leveraging computer instead of using cloud services like from Amazon and Microsoft. They could use spare CPU cycles all over the world from private individuals. And some people are working on smart contract applications to organize and manage all of those spare CPU cycles. I don't know if you've heard about that, but
yeah, I really love that idea. And I think there's one company, I forget their name, but you can send your 3D files off to get rendered using these tokens, which are
Golem. Yes, Golem.
Okay, yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I haven't heard too much about them lately. I think they're slowly advancing, but yes, I always thought that was a great idea, and I hope that more companies, more startups do similar things. To give people more options to process all this virtual reality data. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All right. So why don't you guys now share a little bit now about what you guys are expecting in 2.0 in the near future?
I mean, I can give you a little live demo if you like.
Okay.
Of the web version.
Okay.
And then Andy can talk about the work that Cooper are doing.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just show my screen set. Okay, so can you see that okay?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so you're looking at the entire Bitcoin blockchain history wrapped around this planet. So at the moment we're looking at Bitcoin, and we plan to add Ethereum, Cardano, and other blockchains. So we'll have an entire kind of solar system of different blockchains which you can explore.
So for the people that are listening, I'm looking at it looks like the planet Saturn, right? You think of Saturn with the rings, but the rings of this planet, quote unquote, is the blockchain data. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I can zoom into any part of this and view the data at that time.
Okay.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
And so each blockchain would be a different planet with a different ring, then.
Yeah, that's the idea. It seemed like a very good metaphor to represent that sort of huge amount of data in that kind of flat spiral structure.
Okay, and so that's where virtual reality comes in, where you could simulate approaching the planet, getting closer to the planet's rings.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this at the moment is a fully browser-based tool built with WebGL. So this will be usable on desktop computers, and there'll be a mobile phone version. But we'll also be adding virtual reality support for this. As you'll see in a minute, there's a view which lends itself very well to VR.
So, and this is in 1.0 or 2.0?
This is 2.0 we're looking at now. Yeah, so this is going to be targeting an end of Jan release.
Okay, so it's amazing that you say that on a mobile device we can do this rendering.
Yeah, that's right. We're really just taking advantage of using that GPU horsepower that we have available to us now.
Okay. So again, for the people that are listening, so as you approach the rings of the planet, more features become visible and you see a lot more detail. And so you can drill down and see all the information, all the whatever you're looking for as you get closer and closer to the rings. So yes, very interesting.
Yeah, so here we're looking at a particular block, and all of these hexagons on top, they represent the transactions in that block.
Okay, so there's there's a square. There's squares in the ring, and within the squares, which represent blocks, there's hexagons so that they don't get confused with the blocks, the squares. Okay, so the hexagons are transactions in the blocks, in the squares. That's
right, and so the height of each of these sort of column structures is the transaction value. So you can at a glance really get an idea of how much Bitcoin's moving at this point in time. So this block, there's some data at the bottom that shows what I'm looking at. So this block was March the 14th, 2017. And wow. I can click on each individual transaction and get some data there on the right about it, and then even open it up in blockchain.info.
Right. Okay, now I wrote my own little blockchain explorer called etcplanet.org.com.
Okay, yeah.
But so now when I look at this, all of a sudden I feel like mine is garbage. I mean, this is, yeah, wow. Okay, so you're using a lot of different ways to the height represents the value transferred in the transaction, the height of the little hexagon column. And what determines the position of the hexagons inside the square?
So you can, at a glance, you can get an idea of the health of the network at the time the block was mined. So we're using just a noise function for how these sort of crystal structures are laid out on this block. So the higher the noise, the more randomly placed they become. So you're looking at some quite unhealthy blocks here.
Okay, so the position, the actual position of the hexagons distributed in the square also reveals information.
Exactly.
Okay. And what do you mean by the health and the noise of the blockchain?
So that the health we're taking that from the fee to value ratio. So the amount of fees that people put in with their transactions in order to get them through. So if the fees are very, very high, then we'd consider that to be unhealthy or the network to be under strain. By noise function, I'm talking about it's a three-dimensional function which is controlling the layout of these structures. I can show you a healthy one for comparison. If I just jump to today's date.
Okay, all right. So just to recap for the people that are listening, so the distribution of the transaction hexagons inside the block squares tells you information about the fees and other details of the network. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the latest block that's just come in, and that's much healthier. So you can see that the arrangement of these is much more ordered. They're more sort of closely packed together.
Okay, so if the hexagons are ordered, have a nice structure to how they're placed, then it's healthy. Whereas if it's just kind of in random positions, like a bomb blew up, then okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, very good. Okay, and so and you guys are going to run this on mobile phones and browsers, so that means pretty much the whole world can access it. Yeah, wow, gosh, now, man, I'm just thinking of my own blockchain explorer. I feel like I'm 20 years behind the times. Okay, yeah, Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I can talk you through the VR piece, so and the AR piece that kind of flows off Scott's work. So if you see in the center of Scott's piece, it's kind of obviously it's using this kind of planetary language to it, and as Scott kind of navigates towards it, this big central planet system that sits right in the middle of it all is representative of the mempool. And for the kind of VR installation, we're focusing purely initially on this segment within the overall story, so that it segues really nicely between people going into, say, a gallery space or at a conference, experiencing the VR, and then going on to kind of have a look online, and those kind of stories flowing between them. Let me just share my desktop and I'll show you some images. Let me try and figure out how I do this.
Now, while you're doing that, can somebody elaborate on, you said the mempool, and so it's used to describe the mempool. Can you elaborate for the listeners what that is?
Yeah, Scott's particularly good at.
Okay, Scott, can you elaborate while he's setting this up?
Yeah, so the mempool is basically where all the unconfirmed transactions are being collected before they make it into a block. So in the web version, the sort of planet in the center is representing where all those transactions are congregating. So Kuva are looking at a visualization of that data. So whereas the bit that I'm working on is really the sort of historical data of the blockchain, they're looking at the real time, the here and now.
So did I hear you correctly? Are you saying that the mempool, the transactions that haven't quite made it into the blockchain are represented by the planet or something on the planet?
Yeah, so they're going to be inside that planet. So we're imagining it's shrouded in gas, and you'll fly through that gas layer, and then you'll see all these geometry which are representing transactions flying around.
Okay, and so the dream of every potential transaction sitting on the cold gaseous planet is to make it up to the popular respectable ring. Then
absolutely, yeah, that's it.
Okay, gotcha.
So let me just take you through this. Can you see this okay, guys?
Yes, and I'll describe it for our listeners too.
Okay, good luck describing it. So part of the process about kind of considering the physical context of the installation or the kind of environment that this VR installation will sit in was the physicality that surrounded it. So rather than just creating a space that somebody would walk into and have to put on a headset and then be transported, we wanted to create a kind of physical handoff moment at a point at which there might be, and some of these ideas are kind of forming or kind of solidifying, but there might be a physical handoff. So you would have a kind of nice interplay between the digital and the physical, and I'll get into exactly what I mean by that in a couple of seconds. But what you see here is purposefully monolithic in design, and it's more kind of evocative of the wider language that exists that we've kind of defined along with Scott that sits around the cryptocurrency and the blockchain in general. And so as you go into the space, you're presented with this, monolith that's intriguing. It's reflective as it stands at the moment. So it really almost feels quite infinite and almost kind of difficult to see its shape and form because it is so reflective and really kind of intriguing. And there's just another version of how that might look in a slightly more kind of busy environment within a gallery. But really what we did with this kind of sphere that's cut out from the center of the monolith is a receptacle effectively for that central piece that sits within Scott's work. So the planetary system and the mempool in general. And really we wanted to kind of, create this kind of physical void that would really allow us to fill it digitally when people get into the VR experience. Sorry, Chris.
So I was just going to say, so for the people that are listening, so it basically looks like you're walking into a high-tech museum of the future. Right.
Yeah, okay. A little bit. I think we wanted to make sure that what we were creating physically sat within a museum or gallery context with authenticity, so it wouldn't feel like that it's us trying to play at creating something artful, that it genuinely had artistic substance to it, and that's really why we created something that was physical, really, rather than just installing a load of hardware, really.
Okay.
And so then moving through, what we will do as the piece is set up in a particular environment is we'll actually use a kind of scanning system called LiDAR. It's kind of laser scanning. It's super high fidelity. And what that will do is that'll scan the entire room and create a point cloud piece of data for us to pull into the VR experience, so that when you put on the headset, you get, and as you see here in this visual, you get the entire environment that you are very familiar with already represented through a point cloud in front of you. So you'll have more of a physical relationship and a physical understanding of where you are. And we didn't want to take people out and rip them out of where they were physically and transport them into somewhere, you know, tremendously abstract. We wanted to make that a kind of gradual phase. So we feel that this kind of LiDAR scanning moment where you put it on and you can look around, and the seat that you saw with your eyes on the floor beside you is still there, and you can reach out and you'll understand where that is in a kind of physical context, while still wearing effectively the VR blindfold, for want of a better way of terming it. And I think we're super conscious as a studio just of how those how those physical experiences, how this digital technology can feel quite unwieldy to certain people. If you've not been into VR before, you are in no uncertain terms putting a blindfold on, and so we just wanted to make sure that felt both comfortable and at the same time tremendously immersive.
Okay, wow. Now that's a whole new idea that I've never heard of. That's another creative idea. So LiDAR, if I understand correctly, that's the technology that the self-driving cars use to figure out what other cars are on the road to avoid. And so you're instead of making an environment completely divorced from where the person physically is, you're using LiDAR to create the VR to correspond in some way to the actual environment. I had never heard of that idea before, but I can see what you mean, that it's a little less jarring and disorienting if there's some similarity.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it's exactly that. That's where the technology does come into, and it is used dramatically or used widely. But yeah, we also felt that it's quite, if you've ever seen what a LiDAR scan actually looks like, the representation that we have there is pretty bang on. That's what it'll look like when you go into it, and it creates this a kind of beautiful digital representation of the world. And again, just back to that point, really getting that kind of nice handoff.
Okay, so wait, now let me ask you the logical progression of this would it be possible then the LiDAR would work so well that you could use this VR and literally walk around the room, and so you could experience the real world through the VR version of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're using an untethered VR headset, so it'll have no cables attached to it. You'll put it on and you'll be free. And that kind of leads us into a certain amount of kind of how we elevate that experience. We want people to feel that when they put it on, they don't feel that they're going to trip over things, that they understand where they are, that they will be able to physically walk around, and the monolith will sit in the center of that. Now, well, it won't be part of the point cloud. It'll be rendered differently. People will be able to walk around and sit down on a seat, knowing that seat is there without actually physically seeing it, or walk up to the monolith and reach out and touch the monolith without actually physically seeing it.
Okay, so the surfaces, the shapes of everything is the same. It's maybe the appearance of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I see. Wow. Okay, I'd never heard anything like that before.
So then when you, when the kind of experience kind of kicks off, and what you saw just towards the end of kind of what Scott was showing you, the kind of turbulent, Scott, what's the language I'm looking for? How would you describe those gaseous flows that kind of come off your crystals? When they kind of, what you're seeing here is really that moment that they are coming through this outer layer of the mempool and kind of traveling down towards this central, more solidified kind of aspect of the mempool. So this is them effectively congregating. We're looking to, I'll just leap back just ever so slightly just to tell you the kind of the story that we're telling here. So we're talking about, or we're taking people through the point at which a transaction is considered in somebody's mind, all the way through to that transaction being effectively processed. And what you see in the tendrils, really, in the kind of the lines here, is that moment of consideration before that transaction comes into being and is pushed into the mempool. And then as they congregate round and are collected on the surface of the mempool, they light up and they'll swirl around in a kind of a turbulent, kind of maelstrom-esque kind of manner. So, quite dynamic and interesting. So you'll be able to walk up to that and investigate that and see that the monolith that sits beside it or behind it, or the mempool sits inside rather, will be echoed. So it'll have this mirrored echo that sits out behind it. So visually it will feel tremendously interesting, and these kind of, the transactions on their journey will flow around you and past you, and in a complete immersive kind of moment.
Okay. Wow. So for the people that are, the potential transactions start in the planet and then end up when they're in the blockchain in the rings. And yep. So you're just doing making a presentation of how they get into the mempool, organize, and get to the rings.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of origin story, if you want to use it that way. We felt that was an interesting, one of the things that we have to consider within a gallery context, or within any context specific to a certain degree experience, is that time is of an issue. So we have to have a story that has a beginning, obviously a middle and an end within a rough kind of 5 to 10 minute window. Obviously people aren't going to spend hours or days in here. So we have to take them on that journey, and that story has to work within that time constraint. So that's part of the reason that we felt that focusing on the mempool was particularly appropriate for this experience.
Okay. And are you guys Arthur C. Clarke fans? 2001. You keep talking about monoliths, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think the monolith, and I think there's just a nice analogy that sits within the physicality of the context of the monolith, in that to a certain degree, a lot of people, outside of the community, find the concepts that underpin it, quite impregnable and quite challenging to discover or kind of get into. And so part of us was just to, as much as we are fans of Arthur C. Clarke, I think, and again, it's just riffing off a lot of work that Scott's done. It just made a lot of sense for us to work with that structure, really.
Okay.
But yeah, so then moving on, so that's what you'll be presented with as you're in this kind of VR space. But then you'll be able to reach out with your hands and grab one of these memes as they're passing by you. And you'll be able to interrogate them, so you'll get all the detail that you would expect anywhere else in the wider Symphony project. Be able to understand the size, the value, the all of the fees attached to it. Just understand detail about that individual mem in a very exploratory manner, a very physically exploratory manner. So plucking it and then holding it in your hand and then letting it go, and it'll flow back in. But obviously we wanted to kind of build up to this singular kind of moment, effectively, when the confirmation moment, when a chunk of mems are effectively pass out of the mempool and then pass on to the blockchain, Scott's work. And so what you're seeing here is that moment that, as we kind of looked at it, again, it's that kind of cataclysmic, seismic moment, if we're wanting to kind of riff off the kind of planetary language again, where effectively a kind of fissure cracks the mempool, and these MEMS that are being confirmed congregate to form this portion that is extracted from the globe, that travels off and has a different materiality and visual aesthetic than the rest of it. So it's kind of more in line with the kind of crystalline material that Scott's working with. And as it kind of floats off, and it will dissipate and kind of disappear out, but it will feel quite seismic. So like a crescendo, a physical and visual and auditory crescendo, which really kind of finalizes your experience within the mempool and within the VR experience. And all of this is just important to say as well, like Scott's work is, or throughout Symphony, is all built on live data, on real data. So what you're seeing is something that is 100% authentic.
So just to recap, so the potential transactions in the mempool in the planet, they look like beautiful diamonds, right? These huge diamonds, and you have the nice rendering. And so when you grab these diamonds, you can see the details about that specific potential transaction. And then you were talking about that when they get organized into a block, there's a fissure and there's this dramatic effect as they go out to the ring. When you talk about fissures and that, what you were describing sounds like almost like a volcanic eruption. Yeah,
it is. And I think we kind of liked that as a method for explaining that moment, and explaining the kind of the transition from one phase to another, from one environment to another. We kind of enjoyed what that really kind of gave us in terms of a physical language as well, as much as anything else.
Okay, and so on Bitcoin, transactions happen on average about every 10 minutes. So you'd have every 10 minutes, you'd have a volcanic eruption. But then on something like Ethereum Classic, right, it could be like every 10 or 15 seconds. So you'd see these eruptions going off pretty much all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the interesting kind of evolutions of the work, really, is how this works functionally as a comparison tool, ultimately, and how we can maintain a sense of a kind of quality experience, or something that doesn't break down when, like you say, the speed at which the kind of confirmation happens is accelerated dramatically, that doesn't feel too frantic, that visually you're not overwhelmed, and that it still has value in terms of a tool for analysis, really.
Okay, good. All right. And so, yes, that's anything else? That was a pretty good, thorough explanation. Did we miss anything? Scott, did you want to add anything?
I'm just going to briefly add that all of this, while it is in VR, there will be an AR component to that as well. So you'll actually be able to see all of this in in AR as well as VR, as you see it, as we've gone through.
Okay, so for the people that don't know, so virtual reality, you're totally immersed. Augmented reality, AR, you're still seeing the real world, but there's virtual components superimposed on it.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
And so maybe some people would prefer augmented reality versus virtual reality versus total immersion, and so you're giving them the choice then?
I think it's as much about accessibility as anything else. I think what we wanted to do was, in the first and foremost, like Scott's work, give everybody access, as many people as possible access to this piece of work within AR, and really that's where it kind of exists. And then the obviously the fidelity of that experience on a mobile handset is a certain level, but the level to which we can push that with dedicated hardware is significantly greater. So really that's where those two hand off. But it's as much about audience and getting it out to as many people with AR, and then for specific contexts, whether those galleries or conferences, create an experience that's just slightly elevated but does a very similar thing.
So you want to have, depending on people's hardware, they could have more or less immersion and so you want to be able to serve all of those people, the people with the little dinky, cheap smartphone and the people with the fancy VR. Yep. Okay. Now, what do you guys think of Google Cardboard, the 360 video? That seems kind of interesting for on the low end smartphones. I wonder are you guys using that, or is that something? Could you get a good experience with that?
That's something that we're looking at with the web version. Really, Google Cardboard will give you a very basic experience, but then you also have Google Daydream, which you have certain phones which meet a criteria to be Daydream ready, and you'll get a better VR experience from that. So that's something that we want to bring to the web version, because it makes sense if somebody's at their laptops or looking at it on the phone already, just to be able to put one of those headsets on. So very much about democratizing the experience. Okay,
see, you know more than I do. I'd heard of Google Cardboard. I'd never heard of Google Daydream. So I assume that's like the next evolution. That's even nicer. So what I understand you said.
Yeah, it's essentially the same technology. Daydream and Cardboard. You're putting a phone up to your face, and you've got a camera for the left and right eye. But Daydream comes with a headset that you can purchase, which is this nice sort of soft cloth, quite comfortable headset you can put on, and it just gives you the most premium VR experience on a mobile that you can get at the moment, really.
I see. All right, and then also we didn't want to forget to touch upon there. You guys have a forum. Kevin, do you want to start the discussion about that, or introduction about the forum you guys are working on?
Yeah, definitely. So we just launched the forum yesterday, and we want it to be the essentially the central hub for all things Symphony. So if you're going in to learn about the project, we want you to go there. We have a lot of the resources set up so you don't have to browse through countless Google searches. You could just find what you need right there on the forum. We also have so one thing that's important with this project is the fact that these blocks and the visualization, it tells a story. So we want the users to be able to explore the blockchain and look at the blocks and be able to tell a story from that block. So we have a section in the forum, and we're going to hopefully build, story after story from different users and their own explorations. So, for example, one of the blocks that I was looking at was from the Bitfinex hack in 2017, and that had to do with the hacker only sending a certain amount of transactions, but you could see those transactions in this block. So this block essentially told the story of the Bitfinex hacker moving his coins to another address. So we want that sort of community engagement on the forum. So we want the audience to tell their own story about the blocks that they have found. But it's also important to note that the forum is still just in the beginning phases, and we want people to come in and be a part of our community. Like I said, this is going to be the central hub for all things Symphony. So it's going to be really important for the audience to engage in Symphony, and then post whatever they found, if they saw anything cool, if there's anything that piqued their interest, to the forum. So right now the forum is obviously very new, but we're working on implementing some easier logins. So right now we have the ability to log in. If you have a Facebook account, you can just log in with your Facebook account. I'm not sure about how many people have Facebook accounts anymore, but you have that option. But we're going to try to work in other social media platforms. So let's say you have a Twitter account, you don't need to bother signing up. You could just use a Twitter account to sign in. So that's one thing that we're working on to make onboarding into the forum a lot easier. But once you're on the forum, it would be great for audience members to, just jump into that introduction section and, tell us why they're fascinated by the project, what they'd like to see on the project. Tell us a little bit about them. We also have a section in the forum to receive any and all feedback. So anything from constructive criticism to I'd like to see this visualized, or I'd like to see this metric visualized. We want to know. So we have a section in the forum labeled Symphony feedback, and that will provide a sort of repository of suggestions and maybe some complaints, or some different feedback, any and all feedback, positive and the negative. We'll take it all. But the forum, like I said, is just new, and we're really trying to push forward that forum.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Very nice. Yeah. And I'll provide links to the forum and the Symphony software in the metadata. So yeah, good stuff. All right. So did Andy and Scott, did we cover everything? Is there anything I missed? Any questions I should have asked?
Not from my end. No, I think you covered everything.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much gone through everything on the WebGL end, and I think obviously when it goes live, there'll be a bit more to explore. We don't want to give everything away right now, so.
Okay. Oh, there's even more to look at, more to say.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
A whole lot more. One thing I do want to mention, though, is the fact that I'm sure a lot of the listeners are thinking, well, what does this have to do with Ethereum Classic? Well, it has a lot to do with Ethereum Classic, because in the future we plan on visualizing the Ethereum Classic blockchain, as well as other projects like Cardano, Ethereum, and maybe some others, to essentially create a galaxy of different blockchain projects. So it'll be very, very interesting to compare something like Bitcoin with their format to something like Ethereum, which uses a completely different mechanism or different cryptocurrency design. So that will be really interesting to see comparisons side by side. Another thing I really want to hammer in is that we want this to be accessible, this is accessible to anybody with an internet connection, and we want people to explore. We want them to find blocks that tell a story. We want them to just be curious and go through the actual project and just go exploring, see what they find. There's a lot of stories to be told from the Bitcoin blockchain, and especially given the length of history of Bitcoin, there's going to be a whole lot of stories to be told. So that's another thing. Another thing I want to mention is that Symphony does serve as a tool, to better understand the blockchain technology and the underlying features of a blockchain. So when you go to something like blockchain.info, you see a graph, but you don't really understand what exactly is happening other than what you're looking at. So when you go and you actually immerse yourself into the symphony of blockchains, you can actually see the different characteristics, the different blockchain properties, and you see visually how it all works. So it's a very, very good tool for all different levels of users to use to better understand the blockchain technology, and then hopefully in the near future they'll be able to explore other blockchains. So that's one thing I really wanted to hammer in, is that anywhere anybody with an internet connection can do this, and we want them to tell us their stories that they see on the blockchain.
So everybody's invited.
Everybody's invited.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, let me close with this. So Andy and Scott and Kevin also, you guys are obviously very creative, and we know that in our modern society, right, being innovative, creative is important. And can you just maybe can you close by sharing with the rest of us, like, how do you stay creative? How do you come up with new great ideas? Obviously, a big part of that. So Charles had the guts, whatever you want to call it, to ask how you hear a blockchain. Maybe that's one of the reasons he has a successful companies, because he asks questions that nobody else would ask. But can you kind of elaborate on how the rest of us could be innovative and creative like you guys?
I mean, for me, it's just to keep busy, really, keep exploring and keep learning new things. And there are so many resources out there. You can pretty much learn anything nowadays with the internet. So yeah, it really is just putting in the time and learning something new.
What do you do like when you're stuck? When you have a block, you're not sure how you want to do this other part of the interface. How do you kind of break through, issues like that? Do you have a method or something?
Yeah, I mean, well, like all projects at IOHK, there is a very strong research phase at the beginning of all of this. So we're really trying to establish a visual and auditory language for blockchains. So that really does apply to things like Ethereum Classic too, because once we've established this kind of generic language, we can then represent Ethereum using that same language and see a meaningful comparison between the two.
Did you know how everything was going to turn out, and did you have all your questions pretty much answered, or you're just not afraid to kind of go and do research not knowing how it's all going to turn out?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really know ahead of time at all how it would look, and things like we're visualizing the Merkle tree, for example, and when I first came to the project, I didn't really have knowledge of what that was, but obviously somebody like Charles does, so we've had a lot of close contact with him and talking about how exactly that data structure works in Bitcoin and how that will work in Ethereum. And we've come at a 3D representation of this Merkle tree, which can be applied to different blockchains and will serve as a really good educational tool, because it's something which looks we're trying to get something which looks visually stunning, but also everything has meaning. So the form follows function.
Right. And Andy, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share about the creativity puzzle?
I mean, yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think, like any system, the more that you put in, the more you get out. And I think we are just like that. So consumption and curiosity really drive your kind of creative horsepower, and that's something that's been I think the cornerstone of certainly my career. All the way back from before art school, and I think it's an old paradigm, but I believe in it. That the more curious you are, the more you consume, the more you have to, the more creative potential you have, and the more that you were saying just when you can come up against roadblocks creatively. It's the volume of stuff that you've consumed, and that's everything. That's not just we're not talking about a myopic approach to consumption. We're talking about everything from art and culture, and throughout, really, the more you have in your library, the better you are at kind of pushing through those roadblocks.
Okay, good. And Kevin, did you want to add anything to that or any thoughts?
Yeah, so one thing I want to touch on is the fact that nature lends us a very, very good amount of knowledge. So, for example, using the crystal structures to represent different parts of the blockchain, using planetary structures to represent different components of the blockchain. So I think when there's a sort of a creative writer's block, you can look to nature and you can see how does nature do things, and I think a lot of the creativity can come through there for sure.
Okay, so looking to nature, having a large experience to draw from. Okay, all good stuff. Wow, this has definitely been one of the most memorable shows I've done, and I've done around 60 of them. So, wow, this was quite special. So, thank you, Andy, Kevin, and Scott, for explaining your work with us. And for people, you're definitely going to want to check out what they're doing. Again, I'll put the links in the description. And yes, so just thank you guys, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy holidays, Chris.
Yes, happy holidays to you guys and everybody listening. All right, bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.